Greetings, YouTube. As many of you are probably hearing or have heard, Stan Lee, the creator of the Marvel Universe, the reason why everything behind me in my backdrop exists, passed away today at the age of 95. And I've kind of been mulling over how I wanted to share this story, and I just decided to put my big boy pants on and go on camera and just say a few things, hoping and praying that someone out there can benefit from this message, just as I benefited from Stan Lee's life, which might sound like a dramatization, but let me explain. Most of you don't know this, but I grew up without a dad. I grew up without a father. I had an Uncle Ben-like figure in my grandfather, and then my mom was a single parent, and unfortunately still suffers from major bipolar schizophrenia, to the point that my brothers and I would come home every day from school and she would take out her anger on us, and she would be extremely abusive emotionally, verbally, physically, and even spiritually, to the point that we didn't really have an option to get away from the abuse. We just got to kind of lean on each other. And I'm not saying this to you to make you feel bad for me. What I'm saying is that we had very limited options for hope growing up. We were extremely poor. We couldn't really afford anything. We couldn't really even afford food sometimes. We had each other, and that was more than enough at times. But at the same time, it was still really hard. So I say this to say we still could afford basic cable. And in the 1990s, the TV network Fox produced on Saturday mornings this all-star lineup. And one of the shows that my brothers and I watched together was Spider-Man, the animated series. And I quickly fell in love with the character of Peter Parker because I thought, how cool is it that someone somewhere actually designed a superhero to not have a dad, to be poor. Yes, I didn't live in New York, I lived in New Mexico, but he relied on his intelligence and he relied on his sarcasm and quick wit and humor to get out of a lot of situations, and that's how he would distract villains and actually have the upper hand, because Spider-Man, at least to me growing up, wasn't the strongest guy, right? He couldn't take a punch, but he could distract villains with his intelligence, and he also had the intelligence, of course, to make his suit, and in the animated series at least, his web shooters, and then in high school, the first two Spider-Man movies came out, and I loved both of them. They're two of my favorite movies, period, of all time, not just comic book movies to this day, and I further really related to the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. And the last episode of the animated series, which I invite everyone watching this to look up on YouTube, Peter Parker actually kind of breaks the fourth wall with Stan Lee, where he goes to this different world and he meets Stan Lee in his office and gets to basically have this thank you type moment, which I always thought was super cool. And so I'm saying this to say, without Stan Lee and without Spider-Man, this is not dramatic. This is just truth. Like, I don't think I would have had the hope of surviving my childhood nearly as much, because I thought of myself as my own version of Peter Parker many times in high school and middle school and even college and to this day. And when I was going through a particularly very dark period in my life, I saw the commercial for the, now that I know this, Symbiote Spidey Special 3 animation that Marvel Contest of Champions had come out in like the first year. And I fell in love with the idea that I could play as Spidey in like a Mortal Kombat style game on my phone. And I hadn't played a game regularly since the GameCube, since high school. And then to go from like when I watched the Spider-Man 2 movie to now having my own YouTube channel, all thanks to Stan Lee and his Marvel Universe, because there would be no Marvel Contest of Champions without Stan Lee. I just feel a tremendous amount of gratitude toward the man. And I think I read a little bit about Stan Lee in the last couple of years. He's actually had a really tough life himself, a really tough last few years, despite all of his awesome cameos in all of the Marvel movies. And one thing that I read once, and this is really why I am recording this kind of video, and I'm going to take my glasses off for this. I know it seems dramatic, but Stan Lee made relatable characters because he wanted people like me, who grew up poor and abused and hopeless, to have hope. And there are people out there watching this right now who have either been through a very similarly abusive background as I have, or who are going through it right now, and every day you just pray at the end of the day that you'll see tomorrow, because you just need to make it out of the situation that you're in. You just need to find a way to survive and then eventually, hopefully, get out of it. I know that feeling all too well. I had it for 18 plus years. It never leaves you, even after, I'll say that. And so Stan Lee believed that every human being could be the hero of their own story. The key was not to give up before you had a chance to even tell that story. And so I wanted to honor Stan Lee on my channel today by just telling you, the YouTube audience, you can be the hero of your own story as well. You don't have to let the darkness and the villains and the abuse of your life define you. You just have to give yourself the ability to work hard, make mistakes and admit it, and most importantly, to persevere and not give up. Because to me, that's what Peter Parker was. Like, life would throw so many terrible things his way. Spider-Man 2 is a movie that is largely about him losing everything in his life. His job, his home, because he gets kicked out of his apartment, his the girl of his dreams, because Mary Jane was engaged to somebody else, his schoolwork suffered, he lost everything, and yet he still had this moment where he knew that he had the responsibility to do the right thing. And that's always stayed with me. And so Stan Lee, wherever you are, I hope that you are resting in peace. And please, YouTube, remember Stan Lee's belief that every person can be the hero of their own story. They just need to give themselves a chance to be that hero and not give up, no matter how dark their life may be. Thanks for watching. Stan Lee, may you rest in peace.